best laid plans, virtually on schedule, everything going very smoothly. I want to congratulate everybody who's spoken this morning. I don't want to do a plenary now, I'm going to leave that up to the chairs this afternoon in the workshops and how the panel unfolds. The only missing, I suppose, segment or ingredient in everything we've done to date, and we are behind this in a big, big way, and I'm sure many other universities, I know what other universities are, the student experience. And I wanted to try and find a way in which I could include, to some extent in the whole context of this conference, the students themselves. And I set them a little task. It involves using Skype, it involves talking to a couple of professional people in the sports business and the sports marketing area. We're going to show you a very, very short clip in the next 10 minutes because I want to make just one or two final announcements, housekeeping points, admin points before you all go away and have a well-deserved lunch. So this afternoon what will happen is that on your delegate packs, you've been given, I think, a yellow and a blue or a red dot. All of those with a yellow dot on their delegate pack, if you return here to this lecture room at 2 p.m, please. We're going to try and keep the timetable. And anybody, and the rest of you will go down to Lecture Theatre 101. It's identical to this, it's at the other end, it's exactly set up in exactly the same way. And I'll ask the 4 chairs at the panels. So here, workshop 1 and 2 will start at 2 o'clock, with Nigel chairing, Nigel Adderley chairing 1, and Steve Martin chairing workshop 2. And that will be in here for approximately an hour and a half. I'll leave it up to the chairs to determine how that hour and a half runs. 50-50 split, I would suggest panel 1 on first, and then panel 2 following. The same will apply in workshop 3 and 4. And I'd like Adrian to start proceedings for workshop 3, and I'd like Mark Bradley, if you would, to start workshop 4. At approximately halfway through, 3:20, 3:25, up to 3:30, the chairs can conclude there, and they stay where they are, and the audience comes back here, and the audience vice versa. There will be a break, obviously, opportunity for you then, and there'll be coffee ready to serve in the rooms for you. Hope I haven't overcomplicated that. If you've got any other questions, then clearly just talk to me at lunchtime. Are we ready to roll? Stefan, good morning to you. Good afternoon, in fact.
Good morning, Alan.
Thank you. Stefan, it's a great pleasure at the University of Northampton to welcome you to this live web link here at our 3rd annual Sports Marketing Conference. I'd like now to introduce you to my 3rd year Sports Marketing graduate, Ben Warren, who's going to ask you a short question.
Hi, Stefan. Just like to say, first of all, the opportunity for sports marketing students to be able to speak with a leading worldwide professor is absolutely fantastic. So thanks for this opportunity. And could you please give an introduction of yourself and a background to your career in sport management?
Oh, thank you very much, Ben. Yes, so yes, I'm an economist by background, and I did a PhD in labour economics. And to be honest with you, I never really intended to do anything related to sport. I was never a great athlete, although I always tried, and I never thought of it as a research area. But when I was a postdoctoral fellow, I was with a group of people who were trying to think about how businesses can be successful in very competitive environments. It's very easy to understand how a business can be successful in a monopolistic environment, but when there's competition, it seems tougher. And so that's how we got to thinking about football and thinking about that as a very competitive environment. And I started looking for data and found that actually you could get very easily the accounting data for English football clubs. So I started collecting football club accounts and relating their financial success to their success on the pitch. And that's really been the foundation of my research. That started more than 20 years ago, and I still do research on English football club accounts. But it's also broadened to think about some of the wider issues in sports, to think about the way in which leagues are structured, the relationship between clubs and administrators, issues to do with competition law, and really issues to do with business strategy about how to design leagues in a way that is most effective and most likely to attract the fans and therefore most likely to generate income.
I think, Stefan, if I may, from what you've said so far, we'll continue on this theme now. We have introduced here at the Business School in Northampton and in the conferences that we've done to date to ask from practitioners, from academics and from students alike where they see the future, not only of obviously in your area of sport business and sport management, but generally the whole face of the future of sport. Maybe you might make a couple of comments on that particular strand or construct of our conference today.
Okay, so I'm a professor of sport management now at the University of Michigan. I moved here a couple of years ago from Cass Business School in London, and one of the things about living in America is some ways living in America shows you what the future looks like, and the future is a world, if the US is anything to go by, where sports plays a bigger and bigger role in people's everyday lives. It's if you haven't lived here, it's hard to recognize just how much sports saturates life here. It's the everyday topic of conversation. And one thing, unlike in Europe, for example, where traditionally sport has been male-dominated, that's really no longer the case in the United States. So, for example, everybody has a team, a man or a woman. It's no different. And moreover, anybody under the age of 30 has usually participated regularly in sport through most of their school life and sometimes after school, again, regardless of gender. So one of the things is that sports are taking, they've always been important in people's lives, but they're taking an increasing fraction of people's lives. The second thing I think obviously is the globalization trend, which people started talking about globalization really in the 1990s when they talked about business in general. But really, if you think sports is the precursor, sports were, well, FIFA was founded in 1904. So in that sense, football has had a global dimension for a very long time. And indeed, the World Cup started in 1930, and we've had international competitions going back more than a century now. And that globalization is continuing, and of course it's enabled more and more by the media, and that's obviously the major theme of your conference. And I think it's important to recognize the transformation that's taking place now. The advances in new media in the last 20, 30 years are completely transforming the way we consume sport on a global scale. So I think of sort of three examples here of the scale at which this is happening. So one is obviously what still the most commercially valuable sports league in the world, the NFL. The NFL now generates more than $5 billion a year for broadcast rights alone. Really, the crowd in the stadium are just extras at a show which is being put on for a TV audience. Now, the NFL is in many ways in the lead in this, and they marketed themselves as that kind of made-for-TV sport right from the beginning. But everybody else is really having to follow, and that changes the way you think about the races, changes the way you think about what's important about the sport, particularly thinking about things like the broadcast values, the quality of the pictures, and thinking about related media opportunities. Obviously, through the internet now, we look at a lot of opportunities through mobile telephony and through social media, and that really is opening up big new areas of commercial development where there are enormous opportunities for people to make money, maybe in ways that the fans like, maybe the fans don't like, but I think that's a very important aspect. A second example, obviously, is the English Premier League, which is, in many ways, I think of it as being sort of NFL global, where they're now being able to reach into so many overseas territories that they're generating nearly half of their broadcast income from overseas sales, which is unique still in the world of sport to generate so much of your revenue from abroad, but which means that increasingly they're less focused on what the UK market might be interested in and more thinking about what global partners are interested in. And that is creating enormous commercial opportunities for Premier League and for the Premier League clubs. So you think about Manchester United constructing these hundreds of micro-marketing deals in small countries or smaller countries around the world, or maybe big countries which are not traditionally sources of revenue for sports teams. And that's really boosting their marketing revenues and is to a large extent is the engine of their growth at the moment. And I think that's a second kind of important development. And then the third example I would give is in cricket and the Indian Premier League. The Indian Premier League is a huge marketing phenomenon. The broadcast rights are worth more than $10 billion, which for a cricket competition is extraordinary. In a period of only 5 years, they have gone from nothing to being the most dominant broadcast event in India, and also increasingly shaping the way the world of cricket is developing, and obviously shaping the way people think about the game and shaping the marketing opportunities in the game. And it's also creating problems as well. It's creating problems in terms of conflicts with traditional structures of cricket, and the IPL amongst administrators has as many opponents as it has cheerleaders, and creating issues as we've seen now with there's a big match-fixing scandal obviously going on, and creating and ultimately because of political competition to control this incredibly valuable asset. So I think there's plenty of meat there for marketers and business management analysts to get into, to think about how these sports rights will change, how the sports competitions will change in the future, and the impact, the changing impact they're going to have on our lives, and the business opportunities that are going to go along with that.
Stefan, I think you've given us an absolutely fantastic insight for both myself, my colleagues on the sports marketing student side, and clearly, hopefully, our audience here gathered at the conference. I'm going to hope and request that possibly this time next year you can join us in person. But may I just, on behalf of everybody, say a massive, massive thank you. And I'm going to leave the last question, maybe for Ben, just to add something and ask you a final question before you leave us.
Yeah, based on the cricket, really, from a more of a personal perspective, cricket's my first sport. So do you think that this IPL will spread to other cricket-playing nations, like particularly in England? I know there's a lot of talk of the 2020 being restructured. Can you realistically see that happening in the next few years?
What I can certainly envisage is that kids growing up who are interested in playing cricket are increasingly just going to want to play 2020. The key talent in cricket is, if you're a batsman, is going to be to hit sixes, because that's what is being rewarded in the marketplace. So I think in that sense, the game is going to be changed from the bottom up. People will you will engage a broader audience, perhaps not a traditionalist audience, but you will engage a larger audience if you have the bish-bash kind of cricket that the IPL provides, and there's no doubt in my mind that athletes will want to be driven towards performing in those kind of markets, because typically athletes do go where the rewards are largest. So I think it's inevitable that that type of cricket will take over. But I think the other thing is that I doubt that any other country will be able to launch a competition that will be as dominant as the Indian Premier League. And I think again, it's a fascinating indicator of the shift in commercial power around the world. When we talk about the rise of the BRICS China and Brazil and Russia as being these new economies which are growing at very fast rates and starting to catch up with Europe and North America. But in the sports world, there are very few examples of developing countries being able to lay on major sports events